Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Jesus and a Dream podcast, where we believe with Jesus and a Dream, anything is possible. Nothing is impossible, and the possibilities are endless. I'm Caleb. This is Zach.
What's up?
We want to enjoy life and build God's kingdom. We've had a lot going on the past couple weeks and a lot coming up, and we're just excited to talk about it. Have a good conversation today, and so we're just going to talk about some of the things that inspire us, maybe some things that we're learning, some things that we're consuming, maybe that are changing our lives, like media or whatever, but we just want to have a good conversation today. Hopefully you enjoy. Zach, what has been inspiring you lately?
Yeah, so something that's been on my mind a lot that actually brings a lot of inspiration is this company called Free International, and what they do is they organize what they call a big search, and so they will organize churches and law enforcement in a city, and they will go out and put together what they just call it a big search, where literally all the volunteers and all these people will do some research and find any missing people that they can find. And so they have a big list of all the missing people in the area and missing kids, and they will just go out and literally, okay, what neighborhood? Let's go talk to the people in the neighborhood. Have they seen them? Did they know where they might have gone? And because it's literally all the stuff that kind of slips through the cracks of the law enforcement spends so much time, they can't send out 300 volunteers to go for every single person. So then Free International is like, well, we'll put together a ton of volunteers to go and find people. So the reason that's inspiring to me is because when I did I'm going to do some video work for their big search coming up here in Minneapolis. And I did some video work previously to help them shoot some training videos. And this is the part that I think the inspiration comes from, is because in the training videos, they explain what they do. They also explain the scope of the problem of missing kids and exploited kids and missing people just in general. And you hear about this stuff on the news and you're like, wow, this is a big, bad problem, right? And then he goes into the statistics and the details and more detail than anyone would ever want to know, because it is such a dark topic. And after that, and then I'm going through editing all the video, right? So I spent a lot of time going over these details, and it was just you just kind of are left with this moment of wow, this is such a massive, massive, massive problem, and I don't like it so much. I wish it just went away, and I don't want to think about it and deal with it, right? That's a lot of response to something that's just so overwhelming and so negative. And so the inspiration part is because the guy leading the charge is a pastor who is used to be in the Navy. And so he was like, I have a set of skills in search and rescue and organization in large scale. So I'm going to put them to use and do what I can. And literally in one of the videos and talking to him later, his why is if you have, his example is, okay, all these fish wash up on the ocean and you're trying to get them all back into the ocean where they belong, or on the beach, and you're trying to get them all back in the ocean, and they're like, there's so many. It's how? You're obviously not going to get them all. And then he's like, but each one that you take and you throw back into the ocean that gets to live the rest of its life how it should, he's like, it matters to that one. And so I don't know, I've been thinking about that a lot, where he's just that, I don't know, that focus of you have this huge mountain, and he's like, yeah, but every step matters, right? And he's like, it matters to the people who, okay, I save only one person this time, that person's life is completely changed, and that makes it worth it. And it's you hear that a lot of, as long as one person gets helped, it's worth it. But then to actually think about it, and it's yeah, you're literally saving someone. And, a lot of these people are in situations that they've put themselves in, and occasionally they find people and they're like, okay, you found me, but I didn't need to be found, and I'm fine where I'm at. I'm sure there's a small amount of that, but there's also the amount of people who are like, I didn't know anyone was looking for me, and I could never get out of this situation until someone found me and got me reconnected with family and whatever. So it's literally changing the trajectory of people's lives permanently is, in the positive way, is just so inspiring. Just thinking about where he's just this problem is 100 times bigger than me, but everyone else is too scared or doesn't have the ability to do it, so I'm going to do the best I can. And that just creates, I don't know, there's just this drive to it that is just so inspiring. Yeah, that's where I'm at. So yeah, anything you've been reading or watching?
Before we get to that, I want to know, like, what has this inspired you to do then? Like, how has that moved you to action, if it has in any way?
Honestly, just like, it's that, I don't know if it's what the word is for it, but when you see someone do something with your own eyes that you can relate to or connect your own life with, it makes you think, okay, I know this person can do it, then I can do it. That kind of like, or if nobody knows like something can be done, and then one person does it, and then everyone else is like, oh, it can be done, we can do this. I think that's a whole thing of like the people who sprint the mile or whatever. There was like a limit that no one could break forever, and then one guy broke it, and then everyone's like, oh, it can be done. Well, then I'm going to push myself extra hard because I know it's possible, and I'm not going to like give up. Like, so that's me. Just honestly, so much stuff in my life that I feel like is big and like untouchable, and that would be one is being a filmmaker, and in the sense of, the big long distance goals of having like feature films made. Those just, I've heard from everyone, it's like feature films are really difficult to make. Excuse me. And so, and like they just take so much like resources and time and all these people, and you're just problem solving left and right endlessly. And it's such like a big goal and seems so large that sometimes you're just like, okay, I'm not even going to like take steps towards that because it's just so much to like comprehend and look at. Just different stuff of just in my own life. I'm trying to think of another example. Well, just, yeah. Like,
I want to know, let's go with the filmmaking. What's like your one fish? Like, yeah, I know you believe you can do it, but like, how has this like moved you? Like, what are you doing currently right now to like chase after that goal?
Yeah, I think so. It actually kind of, changed a very small amount of my perspective on it, because a lot of people, right, like film is your audience can be one person, and it can be a theater of people or multiple theaters of people, and just talking thousands, millions of people watching something. And so that moment where he's like, well, I'm doing this for that one person, and the effect that what I'm doing has on that person is so immense. If you think about it like in that way of like, we are sending out hundreds of volunteers and spending, I don't even know how much money they spend to put all this together and fundraise, and you funnel all that into one person. In any normal, like, you'd say that is a waste of time, right? We're doing all this work for one person to receive the benefit. But then if you were to say, in this equation, it is balanced, it is worth it. This massive amount of work for this one person's life to be changed is a worthy use of all of this resource and time. Then that kind of makes me think like, okay, so going into filmmaking, for example, we shot some stuff in North Dakota, and it was like so much work, and to a point where we're like, we are shooting so much, we are editing so much, and we are doing just like this insane amount. It felt like that huge amount of just effort and work, and we're just pouring ourselves over it and trying to craft something as amazing as possible. And then we kind of reached a point where, I mean, I don't know how much we want to talk about it, but it kind of reached a point where we couldn't do a big launch party like we wanted to,
we couldn't make it public like we wanted to.
And so it kind of was like, oh, we just did all of this work, and now, is it ever going to see the light of day, kind of a thing. And then the person who was the subject of the film that we shot it for and kind of told his story, he watched it and he was just like, wow, dude, this was so inspiring. And like, this has like moved me to just see, everything going on from a filmmaker's perspective and a different perspective of his own life. And just, he was just so like moved and was like, wow, this was incredible. Like what you guys, just couldn't be more amazed by it and thankful for it. And that was like, that kind of like, okay, no, because I believe that what that guy's doing will affect so many more people in a longer term than what my film could do, or we'll say just, hypothetically. So if my one film was all just created and generated to give all of that back to him and get him extra excited, extra inspired, give him more energy and effort to do what he's doing, and then that will impact people in a very, very, very real and long-term way. It's like, okay, maybe that is worth it, so it kind of like changes your mindset around to that's where the inspiring is. Like, it kind of gives me a little bit of priorities, refocused a little bit, and also just that, like, I literally talked to a guy who looks at a problem that is so massive, nobody wants to talk about it, and he's going, I'm not even going to talk about it. I'm just going to start going up against it and doing everything I can. And I love that spirit of just like never giving up and fighting against it.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love all of that. I love, that spirit of, and kind of like going up against the impossible, because it's only impossible till it's not. And also, I think, to answer your question, what's inspiring me is that idea of not talking about it and just doing it. I feel like I'm entering into a season, which is ironic because we're on a podcast talking about it, but this is also us doing it. Like, we don't have to be doing this podcast. We feel like we're supposed to, and we feel like it helps, and it just happens to involve talking as well. But that idea that there's a saying that's like, I'm blanking right now. There's a saying of teachers teach because they can't do. And that's something I've been like contemplating lately, is teachers teach it. And that's really just like speaking information, knowledge. Like, if you teach math, you are doing math, but you're not doing math in a way that like forwards math in general, if that makes sense. But also, I don't know if I believe the whole teachers teach because they can't do. But I think there is a difference between, this, let's take this Freedom International, for example, of him teaching about like missing persons, sex trafficking, whatever, spreading awareness of it, and then actually going out and we're going to find these kids. Like, I have the information, now I'm going to do something with it. And I guess teachers are teaching, so that's what they are doing with it. But all of that to say, I don't know if I agree with that statement or not. That's something I've been thinking about for a very long time. But as I've been contemplating it for my life, what do I care about most? Do I care most about other people knowing what I know? Or do I care most about doing the most with what I do know, if that makes sense? And I don't know if they're opposite or different things, but that's just something I've been thinking about lately, is not talking about it, but being about it. And then one of the things that's been inspiring me lately is my grandpa grew up in this tiny town of Clarkson, Minnesota. And apparently some high school kid is writing an article on him because he was known as like the crazy fisherman. And so a bunch of like newspaper articles were written about him. And so my dad was going back and finding all these things, and he decided to send them to like me and my sister too. And I've been reading them. So my grandpa died when I was 1 or 2. So I never really knew him. I knew about him, like what like my parents had told me, but this is like the first time like I'm reading like an account of his life. And I was actually reading one right when you got here, and it was actually the editor of the town newspaper was talking about how he never knew my grandpa. He knew about him because like he was quote unquote like famous like in the area because he was this crazy fisherman. And the reason he was crazy fisherman is because he fished long and hard and told everybody about Jesus, and he caught like pretty much a world record catfish. He never took it in for official like weighing, but it weighed 100 pounds and was 5 feet long. And he caught it by himself. Yeah. And anyway, so everybody knew my grandpa's name was Freeler. And I'm reading this article that this editor of this newspaper wrote the week that my grandpa died, because my grandpa had for years written letters to the editor to this guy, and he was always talking about Jesus, and he was always talking about his faith, and he was always talking about his Christianity. And the guy's talking about like, I had a job to do, I couldn't like publish these in the paper. Like it had to be about like taxes or town discussion or whatever. And this guy keeps writing to me about his faith, and he's like, at first I would just like write him his rejection letter back. And then he's like, as I continued to read them and got to know this guy, like we developed a relationship through like the mail. And he's like, I even called him one day and was like, I'm kind of sorry, like I can't publish these, but I have a job to do. And my grandpa told him, it doesn't matter whether you publish them or not. I feel like God is telling me to write, and so I just write you. So it doesn't matter what you do with it. I just need to be obedient. And my grandpa ends up like dying, and this guy never met him face to face, and then he writes this whole article about my grandpa, and his faith and his story and like all of that stuff. And so that was just like super inspiring for me, as well as like all of these other articles that were like written about him, of like how he was just a man who I think I like take after, and like my dad for sure takes after, like saying, you know what, like we have an opportunity to like have a relationship with the master of the universe. He has goals for us to do these things, and he has tasks for us to do, and our job is to invite him into our life and let him do it through us. And because he talked about like, I want to be the best fisherman in the world. I read all of these books, like I do all of this research and all of that stuff, but when it comes time to fish, when it comes time to do, like I invite the Lord to like fish through me, and I invite the Lord to like give me the best catch, and like I will stay out there and be persistent. And like he would literally go for days at a time until he caught a fish. And it paid off because he literally has like an unofficial world record, right? And people know about him, and he was best fisherman in the world in my eyes. But all that to say, that's been like super inspiring for me, because it's like I have these big goals. Like I want to be the greatest in the world at several things, and that reading those things just like inspired me to be like, okay, if these are the things the Lord gave me to do, I will do my research and I will be like competent in it, and like we talk about. But like when it comes time to do it, I'm inviting the master to like work through me. Because I don't actually, even though I have this information and this knowledge and this competency, when it comes time to like alter reality, like I don't actually know how to do that, but God does, because he literally created it. And so that has been like super inspiring to me, and kind of see like that definitely relates even like with what you're saying of like these massive dreams. And that's why we call it, Jesus in a dream. And so, yeah, that's cool that it's been inspiring to me, and it's through like my family and through like my history and my legacy and my bloodline, and like knowing that like his blood like runs through my veins, and like his spiritual inheritance is also mine. So that's just been super like inspiring and comforting for me lately. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I like where the editor was like, okay, stop writing letters. Like, and he makes it clear, I can't publish these, right? So he's like, what you're doing is a waste of time in his eyes. And he responds with like, I feel like I'm supposed to write this to you, so I'm going to. And I think that is such a great picture. And that's something like I'm going through right now, of the Lord like asks you to do something, and then you look at what is our perspective and you say, this is going nowhere, or this is pointless, or like, I must be missing something because this isn't adding up, right? But we're not adding up in the way that God sees it, right? So it's like he's, he could be like, okay, I've gotten a rejection letter after rejection letter. This makes no sense. Like, why am I going to still keep writing? Right. And the point is that his stuff isn't supposed to go into the article at that moment. Right. And that's, I think, something that like I deal with all the time is like just right now I'm like looking into getting a studio, and I'm like, I don't really understand how a studio leads to where I'm supposed to go, but I'm just going to trust the Lord that is. And it's like, we'll just have to see what happens, and that's where it's like, yeah, those moments, I think that is such a huge piece of faith, is if you have to like trust the Lord when it doesn't make sense. And that is so hard to do sometimes, when you think you see where it's supposed to go, and then you're like, God, I think you mean this, or something. Or, he's like writing these letters, and maybe he's thinking, okay, should I go meet this guy? Should I talk to him face to face? Is that what's important? And it's like, what you think you're trying to do, is not what I need you to do, because I need you to have, I don't know, written all these letters in paper so that he can republish this article and have all of those things later, or something. That's where like what we think as insignificant details, or things that just are insignificant altogether, like do matter, but we don't count those. And so then we look at other stuff and we go, God, this doesn't add up. What's going on? Like, these small insignificant things are getting in the way, or why are you forcing me? Why do I need to do this? And yeah, I don't know. I just think I love that. I think that's such a huge part of faith, is like, yeah, trying to not like, what makes sense is that you can hear and obey God, and And beyond that, it doesn't have to make sense.
Well, I think this is
At least makes sense to us, right?
I think this is the difference between little faith and great faith. Anybody can make the decisions that make sense. That's not a hard thing to do. People do that all of the time. Great faith is believing in the impossible, believing that God is going to do something against all odds, believing that you can be obedient and it can still be good for you, saying yes to those things that it's like, yeah, like my grandpa, it's like after the third letter, I know I would be questioning, like, okay, what am I doing? And he's demonstrating, I think at this point in his life, he's demonstrating that he's like, I've been following the Lord long enough now that like I don't have to do all of these other things. Like I'm just going to keep doing what I'm supposed to do and believe that because God told me to do it, that it's going to be a good thing. And I think that element is what separates great faith from little faith. And I think that element is what separates people who get their rewards from what they see here on earth. Like Jesus says, like, yeah, like if you pray and you do it out in public and you do it so everybody can see you, you get that reward. Like people will see you, great. It's the people who do it in a way that doesn't necessarily make sense, not for other people, but for God alone, that will get double the reward, that will get the eternal reward. And like Proverbs says, the righteous reap the reward here and in heaven. And I think that is a big thing when it comes to faith is can you do the things that don't make sense because God told you to do it? And I believe the people who do those things are the people who are rewarded the most, because again, it's not hard to do the thing that makes sense. It's not necessarily wrong to do the thing that makes sense, but it's also not the hard thing to do. It's not hard to take a job with a lot of money. That's not a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do to move to China and spread the gospel and make zero money. And that takes great faith. Which one takes the greater faith? It's easy thing to stay inside the boat. It's a hard thing to get out of the boat, right? And so I think that is, what's just really been inspiring me right now is, I think it's easier for me to set aside the opinions of other people or how I'm supposed to be doing things, because now I understand that if I'm doing it because God told me to do it, and it might not be getting rewarded right now, or it might not be making sense, or I might be going in a zigzag motion instead of a straight line, I can know that I am moving in faith because it's the hard thing to do. And I'm not saying to do hard things just because they're hard. I'm saying what God's going to ask you to do is probably going to be hard, and that is like going to reward you then when you do it because you did it against sense and against what other people said you should do.
And there's something, this reminds me of something I think about a lot that was from a actually youth group sermon a couple weeks ago when I was volunteering as a youth leader. And it was basically like something like this: life is difficult, life is hard, and you have two options, right? And what you said is like serving God, doing what he said, obeying him is hard and is difficult because it doesn't make sense, and it's not like a clear, sometimes it is clear, sometimes it's not clear, and like all this stuff. But the alternative is just as difficult and just as hard in a different way. And it's like, okay, well, we're going to follow God. We're going to listen, obey. I don't understand what's going on, but I'm just going to do what he tells me. That is difficult. But what that comes with is, oh, my spirit is at peace. And if I'm trusting the Lord and things work out, that's going to happen, right? If you trust the Lord, what he's going to do, and you follow in his way, it's going to work out. What's really hard is when you don't trust the Lord and you're like, you know what? Okay, I'm just going to do this. I'm not going to do what the Lord's calling me. I want to do this. This feels safe, or whatever, any reason you have, and you do that and it doesn't pan out, or you are just in like, your spirit is just not okay with that because the whole time you're thinking, this isn't where I'm supposed to be. This isn't where I'm supposed to be. And like, that is hard. And I think, and so it's like, which of those two would you rather have?
I think I'm going to add a third option too. I think there's a third option in there, which is the person who trusts in the Lord, who is maybe not rebellious to the Lord, but who also is not interested in the great things, who is just interested in like playing it safe and like loving God, having a relationship with God, like being a good person, being a righteous person, all of that, but not expecting like anything great from it. And I think that's okay if that's the life you want to live. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think that is like, there is a third option that is easy, that is not hard on either side of it, but that is just like, I trust God to just be like right where I am. But I think that's a trust that is like defensive and not like offensive in like, I want to do the most that I can like for the Lord. It's kind of just like, yeah, like I go to church, I do my thing, I'm a good person, and that's it.
And that's where people are, if you get really, really comfortable, then you have to ask the question, am I growing? Right. And that's where, if you're just so comfortable and you're not growing, and that's where it's like, I think you should be striving to always be growing and to getting into more. And yeah, so I think, yeah, that's where I was like, I thought of that where, you know, it's difficult to follow the Lord by just listening and obeying, but there are many, many other, by not doing that, it is also difficult, maybe more difficult, because I don't know. I just think like, why do we see the people who have it all, right? Who have got successful businesses, successful, you know, healthy families and this stuff, and then they're just unhappy. And it's like, they're not where they're supposed to be. Their spirit is unhappy, you know, and their soul is unhappy. And it's like, and that's because they're not, you know, you can have all of the stuff around you, but maybe the word is like the joy that comes with following the Lord, because the joy, it does not depend on the circumstances, whereas happiness depends on the circumstances. And yet you could have all the things to have happiness and you won't have it because it's not like deep down in your soul.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Yeah, what are you like reading and watching these days? Like what's been interesting to you?
Just started a new show called The Rookie on Hulu, and a couple episodes in. It's pretty good so far. It makes me appreciate our police force, even though it's obviously a drama show about it's about Nathan Fillion decides to become a cop, but he's older than your average cop, and so they all give him a hard time for being the old guy in, you know, the police force, and so he has to work extra hard, and you know, all the drama around just your regular cop show. But yeah, it's good. And yeah, it's like, I don't know, makes me grateful. I'm like, man, I don't have to deal with that stuff on the daily. That's just insane to like, yeah, obviously it's dramatized, but there's a lot of truth behind like what people in that line of work deal with. And it's just like, man, I don't know, makes you think like maybe I should be praying for those people like regularly.
Yeah, that's probably a good thing.
What I'm reading, let's see, lately I've been just pushing myself to get back in the Word, and I've been trying to read multiple translations and different versions of like the same thing has been kind of fun. I guess I've only done that when I'm like in church and they have, you know, the one that they preach on, and then I just like to read the other ones to see how it changes. But yeah, lately I've been reading, like I'll read a chapter and then read it in like ESV, NIV, and Message, and if there's another one that comes up. But yeah, that's just been interesting to kind of see through what are like the common threads, which things are like translated exactly the same, which I think is kind of interesting, because then you're like, oh, okay, this is probably exactly the meaning no matter which different way you try and translate it into English. And then some other stuff is just interesting to see where they make variations of just interpretation and stuff. But yeah, what about you?
Yeah, I have just finished one of my favorite fantasy books called Night Angel. Well, it's a trilogy because I got the new trilogy for my birthday, or the newest book, I should say, for my birthday.
So did you reread it?
Yeah, so I'm rereading the first trilogy now, and it's good, just fantasy. It's really like inspiring storytelling. The characters are great. The guy, Brent Weeks, writes really well, and so that's been a lot of fun. And I feel like heroism is just something I really, really enjoy in storytelling, as you probably can tell like by the things we talk about and the things that inspire us. And it's a story about the tortured hero. Like it was about an assassin, and like, is what he's doing correct, and the reasons that he's doing it, are they justified, and all of that stuff. So really been enjoying that. And I'm also reading a book called The House of the Medici, which is about the Medici family in like the 1400s, and they were a banker family that rose to prominence and power and all that stuff. And I just love reading historical books, because I think, like you were saying about The Rookie, it's like you just get a glimpse into humanity. And I've been reading a lot of history lately, and it's just like people don't change. And something I'm learning, I think, about myself is like I am obviously very idealistic in that, like, I dream a lot and I want the best for people, and I want what I do to matter, to change people's lives for the positive. And I do believe that happens, but I believe I'm starting to see that, like, even like God, who wants the best for people and who does who he is, like, comes out, and who he is comes out, and that it's like everything that he does should be like for our good if you love him. But you have to love him, you have to have that relationship. And like God is all powerful, all wise, all these things, and yet people still reject that, and people still choose their own destruction over life and prosperity with him. And so that it's just been giving me a healthier perspective on my life and my life's work of going, you know what, like, I cannot control whether people interact with me in a positive way. People are always going to be people. Even people I trust and love and all that stuff is like, they're like, the Bible says, like, is there a righteous man on earth? And it's like, even I know, like, at times, like, I don't choose the right thing. And so anyways, all of that to say, as I've been reading history and knowing that there will never be a time in history until Jesus comes back where it is like people make the right decisions 100% of the time, I think it's just taken a lot of the pressure off of me. And it's also just completely reduced other people's opinions in my life to close to zero, in the best way possible. I know that sounds terrible, but it's also like where I'm at, where it's like, again, like my grandpa, it's like, if I believe God is calling me to do something, he is transcendent above all of the filth in the world, and he is the one who can see in my own filth, and I just have to trust him to say yes to him. But I also have to be aware that other people are not saying yes to him, and I need to just healthily digest that as I come across those people in life.
Yeah, that's good. I also love, like, yeah, those history ones. Just for me, I like seeing, like you said, people are people, and there's also a lot of other like threads that always come through that you don't realize, especially when you read something that jumps into a time that is almost completely different from us, but there's still so many similarities. And so it's like, yeah, just I don't know who, I was side watching. That's my word for it, when someone else is watching and you're watching little bits of it. But a show about like the Russia back when it was like, oh my goodness, Peter the Great and like stuff like that. When Russia was just this absolute, just in this crazy time of where you had the monarchs and the oligarchs and like the power and the disparity was just insane. And you just think about, yeah, you just see where you put your current existence up against like people in the past, and it's like they had absolutely no clue what life now is going to look like. But there's just so many things that, right, you see through in that are similarities, and you're like, oh yeah, people do the same stuff, or things just happen the same way. Or it also kind of gives you bigger perspective, because you're like, oh, I'm like really concerned about some small thing that in 100 years, 200 years from now, people are gonna be like, what? You did what? Like, I don't understand. You drove car, I mean, probably still be some form of vehicle transportation, but yeah. And I think that when you look at all that stuff, right, it gives you that perspective, right, where it's like, okay, so God has been watching since like creation day one, and he's been there since day one, and he's seeing where all of this stuff evolves to. And then, I don't know. Yeah. I just think here's where I'm going with this. This is what I think about a lot is, our technology is so advanced right now that it is so far beyond any time in history that at least we're aware of. Maybe somebody figured something out and we don't have a record of it. But for the most part, our technology is so ridiculously advanced that it is hard to think that God understands how microchips work and how technology works and how binary works and how computers work, because it is so like man-made, right? It is like the pinnacle of all of our human existence. We have technology that is just insane. And it's like it's almost like we perfectly understand all of our natural world, because we can pull chemicals out of things and mix them together and build, literally like put together atoms and just like so much insanely awesome stuff that we think that it kind of gives us that perspective of like, okay, I think we're like moving past God. Like, I think a lot of people kind of have that idea of God being like, when you think of God and then you think of the Old Testament or even just the New Testament is so long ago, you think God works in terms of like swords and like people groups. And it's like, okay, well, we're like way past that with like technology, and how does God work through like Snapchat, right? And like, and this is what I'm thinking about when it comes to like being a youth volunteer, because it's like, can I believe that God can work through these kids sending Snapchats? And like, can God work through an algorithm to provide the right video to someone when they need it? And like, that was our conversation before of like, you saw a tweet that like changed your life. And it's like, was that Twitter that gave you that tweet? Or was God like provide, or was it, you know, a perfect combination of all of it? And so I don't know, that's just something I think about, is like, you look at history and then you look at us now and it feels like we are such a different place. But then if you were to like really, really zoom out, it's like the people who, when they invented cars in the first place, were like, we're so far above technology. You know, they're probably thinking that same stuff, or, you know, any first invention of something and you think you're just way ahead of like where God could possibly be. I don't know. Yeah. No,
that's all really good thought.
Whole,
I think that's like a lot of like what Ecclesiastes is talking about, or he's talking about like time marches on. Like, none of this actually matters. And like, what I found does matter, says the teacher, is like, enjoy where you're at and like obey God, basically. And I think that's kind of that similar. That's something that I've been thinking about too, is I am hopefully coming to this place, I think, where my ultimate goal is to enjoy life and obey God. And everything that fits inside of that, I want to do. I think I get so caught up in, this is how I should live my life. This is how I should think about my life. These are the types of relationships I have. This is how I should work. This is where I should go. This is what I should eat. This is what I should drink. This is what, and I always want to understand it. And I want to try to break it down into as simple as it can be, because if I can understand it, then I can just do it. And if I can do it, I can just do it well. And if I can do it well, then I can be successful. And what I'm learning is, all of that is meaningless. Like, as Ecclesiastes says, like, it's meaningless to try to understand like why I do what I do and all of that type of stuff. And like, even like what we talk about on this podcast can be meaningless if there isn't this element of, am I enjoying every moment that I have in my life? And like you were saying earlier, joy is not circumstantial. It's like, I think about like when Mal passed away, like I had joy in those moments, as weird as that is to say. Like, I can look back on that memory with a certain amount of like fondness of like what happened in that time. But I think what precipitates that is like obedience to God. Like, am I in right standing with the creator of the universe? Am I in right standing with the creator of the universe, with the current technology, with my current relationships, with my current job, with my current career path? If the answer is yes, then all my stress and anxiety and worry and striving for wisdom and understanding can take a back seat to enjoying my existence while I'm here. And I think I'm really excited about pursuing more of that, because I think for a long time it's been like, how do I figure all of this out? And it's like, I'm finally coming to that conclusion. It's like, I will not, because I don't even know what the next hour is going to bring. So why do I need to figure it all out? As long as I can enjoy the next hour, that's what really matters.
I think too, like, what I think makes Jesus's teaching so just incredible is that it does not, like, the fact that it is easy to apply his teaching to modern day is just a testament to like how he knew what he was saying and like was making it, what's the term, evergreen. It doesn't matter time, it doesn't matter season, it doesn't matter the cultural, like, right, that's the thing, is everyone's like, oh, you gotta dig into like the culture and stuff, but it's like, you don't have to dig that far before, you know, he wasn't teaching and you're looking, okay, he made an he wasn't talking about this specific thing and it was so like small and you have to read a whole book about this thing just to understand it. It's like, no, his stuff was, it stands, that's why it's called truth, is it stands like through any different, you know, it'll stand against today and what we have, like stuff going on today, it still stands true. and it's going to be the same no matter what happens, which is like crazy and I think that's just the quality of like truth, and why it's called truth is because it's not dependent on these things where it's like, oh, well, once this was invented, that actually changes everything Jesus was saying, so we lost a couple chapters because that doesn't matter. You know, it's like, no, that doesn't happen.
Right. And that's like, that is how some people think. That's how a lot of people think, I think, is like, oh, it's outdated. Like, that's an argument all the time against religion, is it's outdated. We know more now, so then we are therefore better than the people who came before us. And I think, yeah, you're right. That stands directly against truth of, if C.S. Lewis and G.K. Chesterton talk about this all the time. If that argument was true, that I am better than my dad, and my dad was better than my grandpa was better than my grandfather, just because we know more about the world, how it works, all of that stuff, then there's really no objective goal line. Like, there's no finish line, because it's always changing from generation to generation. And that is a very scary thought, because that means we'll never reach the end. As humanity, what does that mean for us? It means that we're in a rat race that never ends. And if you want to believe in that, be my guest, I guess. That's so depressing. That's so like anxiety inducing. And I think that's why we do have a lot of depression and anxiety, is because technology kind of has that lie that comes with it, that, yeah, we've exceeded God. We've exceeded the previous generations. Therefore, we are better. And that's just so, it's so, what is the word? When it has no meaning. That's so, like, it means that, yeah, you're superfluous. Is that the word? Because then that just means like the kids coming after us are just going to overtake everything that we've ever done. And that's looking at that in a very negative way, rather than the positive way of like, I'm standing on my grandfather's shoulders in truth, and on my dad's shoulders in truth, because we believe that there's a finish line and we're getting there. Where the other way of thinking is, oh, we're going to bury them and stand on their graves, basically, believing that we're going to be better. Well, what's that mean then for you? Somebody's coming along after you to bury you as well, because time marches on. It's an interesting, like, philosophical thing. How do we even get here? But, like, yeah, it's a fun conversation. How much time do we have left?
We're coming right up on time, so right. Maybe we'll end it there. But, well, I'll add one more thought. And, like, off of that idea, I think, once again, you could step one more step back and say, okay, yes, we can say we know now more than ever, or maybe collectively as a group, we have, you know, everyone has a bigger understanding of information and things than ever before on the average basis, just because of technology is so, you know, widespread, and everyone can learn things and read things. And, but at the same time, it's like, we're all stuck in this, like, no one has cheated death yet. And I think that's where it comes back to, like, okay, religion's old fashioned. It's like, so is death. And we still haven't figured out how to beat that. And it's like, and we won't. I don't think we'll ever figure out how to, like, beat, like, maybe we can extend life a little bit longer, but there's literally just a hard line that's like, God's like, you're not gonna make it past this, because this is what happens. And I think that's where it's like, okay, yeah, you could call religion old fashioned, but it's like, so is dying. And it's like, we all are gonna deal with that, you know? So it's like, and yeah, maybe you can say God is old fashioned in that sense, but it's like, you're gonna have to deal with that when you die, you know. You're not gonna go. So I don't know, I just think of like,
technology like, doesn't have the answer to the start and to the end,
right? Yeah. And it's like, because that's the verse where it's like, everything's gonna fade away and rust and fall apart, and it's like, it is. And you can have the most advanced technology, and it's still gonna, you know, it's still in the same cycle that all of Earth exists on, where things can be built and developed and refined, and you can preserve something, but it will inevitably fall apart and decay. And that's just the cycle of the world.
Yep.
And yeah, anyways, final thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's good. Love it. I think this is a great episode. A little bit different, but great. Love it. Love you guys.
We'll see you next time.
See you next time.